Hi everyone, my name is Paige and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my December reading wrap up. It's a little bit late, so I'm not going to do a January TBR because you'll be seeing my January wrap up in a couple of weeks. So this year, I wanted to read a total of 90 books, and I not only reached that goal, but I was able to surpass it because of what I read in December. So in December, I read a total of 13 books, and this is both reading and listening to audiobooks. Now, I want to put a disclaimer in here. I normally do not read this much, but in the middle of December, I contracted COVID, so I was in quarantine for basically a full week. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and I watched a lot of TV. I read a lot of books. I got a lot of stuff not quite done, but because I was still feeling a little bit sick, I couldn't physically do a lot of things, but I could read. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive on in. If this is your first time here, what I do for my wrap-ups is I just list the books that I read from my least favorite to my most favorite. I don't star them or anything like that because I feel like because of how I read books and how I enjoy them and the purpose of reading a specific book changes with each book I read, I don't feel like it's fair for me to star them. I appreciate the people that do, but I'll still give a full review of every book that I've read, and I'll just be like, this wasn't my least favorite, and I'll tell you if it wasn't good. Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive on in. So the first book that is on my list, it's ranked number 13, is Trial of the Sun Queen. This one it's an adult fantasy, and the whole story follows a girl who is taken out of a prison and sent to compete in these games for the prince's hand in marriage. Now, this book gives off two specific vibes. It reminds me very much of The Selection by Ciccarelli. And while that's not a terrible book, I definitely read them and enjoyed them when I was in middle school and high school. It does have some plot holes, and this book doesn't have as many, but it also just feels so much like it. Another book that it feels like a lot of is Throne of Glass, because the competition is very much a live or die type of competition. It's not just oh, you lose, you go home. No, it's you lose, I mean, if you lose, you serve the king. But a lot of people do die. So it's high stakes. It's moderately well written. I enjoyed reading it, but it's not something that I would want to read if I was looking for something to like make me think or anything like that. It is extremely mindless. So Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha Tooley. Like I said, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite. I feel like it was just too much like other books for me to enjoy it more. It didn't offer any unique perspectives or anything like that. So the next two books, I'm not really going to go into that much detail because they are a later part of a series. And this is The Dark Calling and Arcana Rising by Kristen Cole. I've talked about some of her books in some of my previous videos, and these are books that I just have a lot of nostalgia for. I listened to them when I was in high school, and I enjoy them, but there's also a lot of things that are wrong with them, and some of that is just from the time that she was writing the first one, and in the later ones there's some tropes that I don't love, mainly because I'm not in that situation. It makes it harder to relate to the characters, and the love triangle just kind of gets a little ridiculous. It's young adult, it's a dystopian fantasy type thing. It uses tarot cards, which is one of the reasons why I really like it. I do think that is a very interesting path to take. So I like the books. I'm definitely going to try to find the last one because I've only gone up to the second to last one. So I want to try to find the last one to finish off the series. I don't think it will ever rate as like one of the greatest works ever. I think it's interesting. I definitely think the first few books were a lot better. And that's just one of the things, as you get further into a series, it does get more complicated. So it's a trade-off, but yeah. Arcana Rising and The Dark Calling by Cressley Cole, those are numbers 11 and 12 in my list respectively. So the next book that I listened to, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a book, a lot of you will know this book. It's more of like novella length, maybe a very, very short novel. And this is A Christmas Carol. I listened to it through, Keith Morrison had put out a podcast called Morrison Mysteries, and they did Legend of Sleepy Hollow around Halloween, and then they did A Christmas Carol for Christmas. And he just read the book. Something about Keith Morrison's voice to me is very soothing. I know not everybody agrees with that. But I listened to this on Christmas Day and the day after Christmas, and I like the story. There are parts of it that I'm like, was this 100% necessary to get the point across? And that's my only critique. It's a different time period that they're writing. Charles Dickens was obviously alive in the 1800s. So sometimes it's a little bit more prosy, a little bit longer than it probably needs to be. But I did like the story. It's a fun little Christmas story. I'll probably listen to it again at some point in the future or read it aloud if I ever have kids or anything like that. But yeah, it's A Christmas Story, Charles Dickens. It's pretty classic, and I will probably read it again. Coming in at number 9 on my list is one that I was not 100% sure where I wanted to end up putting it. It's a very well-written book. It just wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. I think if I had listened to it as an audiobook with a full cast of characters, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But because of the way it's written, like I said, it's very well written. It was just not me, and it's not my typical genre. I typically listen to or read anything that's in the realm of like fantasy, mystery, something that's a little bit different. And this is definitely falls more into the general fiction literary category. And that is Daisy Jones and the Six. I can see why it has received such praise. And I've started listening to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo before. That one, the chapters are just extremely long, and I have a hard time listening to audiobooks where the chapters are extremely long. I need those constant breaks, and you kind of see that in here as well. But because I read it, there's kind of like scene breaks where you can pause, come back, and those are definitely much shorter scenes, and then the like parts, sections, whatever you want to call them, are definitely a lot longer. If you've never read Daisy Jones and the Six and you haven't heard of it before or seen the TV show, it follows a band from their inception until when they broke up. It's a made-up band. They kind of go through a lot. It's set in, I think, the 70s, and it's a lot of the drugs, sex, rock and roll type vibes. So there are some content warnings. If anybody that you know or yourself is struggling with addiction, I would not recommend this book because it does deal heavily with that. And sometimes there are also situations that will probably be triggering for somebody who is dealing with a substance disorder. So I liked it. I can see the importance of it. I can see why so many people absolutely loved it and see why it was made into a TV show. Like I said, it just wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. Coming in at number 8 was A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. This book is about a British woman who moves to New York after leaving a relationship and her mother dies, and she is out at a festival and she tries this gelato and it tastes exactly like her family's secret recipe. So she goes back and finds out that the patriarch of the family has had a medical episode and is now have some sort of amnesia. She starts working with the grandson of the patriarch to kind of recreate the secret recipe. And the entire book is her trying to keep up with this lie that she doesn't know what the recipe is and she's just trying to help. But since she actually does know, she's trying to figure out why her mother has said secret recipe of this family. I enjoyed it. It was a fun read. I definitely think that the reason why it's down further than it probably would have been at some other point was because it did take me quite a while to actually read through it. There are just times where I was like, I do like romance, so it definitely is more of like a genre that I've read before. It just, some parts of it I just didn't love, and I can't necessarily pinpoint why, because the plot overall is pretty good. I like seeing the character develop. I like seeing the relationships play out. Like I said, I was just very about parts of it. Yeah, so A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. Coming in at number 7 is The Mystery of Three Quarters by Sophie Hannah, which is inspired by Agatha Christie's characters. It's a Hercule Poirot novel. The book is about a bunch of seemingly random people getting letters saying that the letter writer knows that they killed this man, whose death was actually ruled an accident initially. So the letters are signed by Hercule Poirot, and everybody kind of basically comes and confronts him and is like, what are you talking about? I didn't do this. I can't believe you would say that. You're supposed to be some great detective. And it starts out this huge mystery of how are these people connected? Was that death actually an accident or was it a murder? So, and reason why I kind of ranked this a little bit lower was because I felt like there were parts of the book that weren't 100% necessary. I felt like they were a little bit filler, but I overall enjoyed the book. So if you're looking for something that's written in a little bit more modern style, that's still more of that traditional mystery, if you like the movies that have been coming out recently, I would recommend something by Sophie Hannah that is written with Agatha Christie's characters. Coming in at number 6 is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. I absolutely adored this book. It is a romance. It's a little bit longer than a lot of romances I've read recently, which was nice. And I felt like every scene definitely had that purpose. So the book is basically an enemies to friends to lovers situation. So it starts out like 5-ish years ago in the past, and the two main characters meet for the first time when the guy is actually coming over for a date for the girl main character's roommate. And they kind of instantly like hate each other. They do not get along. Everything about them just clashes. And this is kind of a theme for the first couple chapters of the book. Every time they meet up, something is like, no, not clicking, not working. And then they go from that and they both get out of long-term relationships and they slowly become friends. And I think that's what I really like about it, is because I feel like sometimes enemies to lovers, it's like you go from one extreme to the other. And this one, you kind of see that relationship evolve and you see it built on a foundation of trust and friendship. Whereas sometimes it's like they hate each other, they have sex, and then they start to fall in love with each other. So I think that's why I like this book a lot. If you're looking for a romance, something to just kind of take your mind off things, I devoured it in like a day. So You Again by Kate Goldbeck. So number 5 is a book. I do physically own it, but I lent it out to somebody, so I don't physically have it right now. And that is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This one is a thriller. It's about two women meet in a pub on the night of their 45th birthday. They're birthday twins. And one of them is a famous podcaster, and she starts interviewing the other character who is basically has convinced her that she is at the point where she's going to turn her life around. She is going to start making these big changes And the podcaster's life has kind of been looking at women who have already made those changes. So she's like, well, it would be interesting if we followed the journey of someone who is making those changes to see how it ends up. Slowly you start to see hints of, is this woman who's being interviewed telling the truth? Is what she's saying something I can believe? And that's where None of This Is True comes in. This book I both listened to as an audiobook, and then I also read it. Sometimes I do that just to kind of keep myself immersed in the story. I'll listen to it while I'm walking Luna, especially if I don't have anything else to listen to, and then I'll come back and read it. And this works really well with books that have shorter chapters. So None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, I would 100% recommend it if you're looking for something that's a little bit more of a thriller, something that you are constantly guessing on, like, what's happening throughout the entire book. I definitely did not see everything that was at the end of the book coming. Some of it I did, because obviously the title, None of This Is True, you realize that everything that's happening at the beginning of the book is not necessarily real. But there's plot twist after plot twist after plot twist, and you're taking on a roller coaster. So I'm definitely going to be able to check out Lisa Jewell's other books. This is the first book I've read by her. I'm still kind of newer to the thriller genre. It's only been a couple of years since I started reading it, and usually it's like 1 or 2 books a month, if that. Sometimes I go months without reading anything in that genre, and it's just like fantasy, young adult, stuff like that. So yeah, Lisa Jewell, None of This Is True. So my next 3 books, which is 4, 3, and 2, all are part of the same series. So I'm just going to kind of talk about them together, but I'll list them out on what I thought of them. And this is not the first time that I've read this series, and that is the Percy Jackson series. Because the TV show came out on December 20th, the first 2 episodes, and then they've been releasing more episodes as the weeks go on, I decided to go ahead and refresh my brain on what happened in the books. It's been probably about a decade since I've read them. So I just went ahead and I reread them. I'm on number 5 as I'm filming this. So in December, I read the first 3, and this was definitely one of the books that I the books I read during my COVID. So the first one that I have ranked at number 4 is Sea of Monsters. For some reason, I've never liked this book as much as I like the other ones. I don't know why. Just for some reason, I just don't like it as much. Nothing against the series or anything. I still loved it. It's just probably my least favorite out of the bunch. The next one is Titan's Curse, which is the number 3. So that comes in at number 3. And I really like this because that's when we really fully see Blackjack, and I absolutely adore Blackjack. For those of you who don't know, Blackjack is Percy's Pegasi. And he has some sass. And then number 2 is The Lightning Thief, which is the first book in the series. One of the reasons why I love these books so much is because they are so fun, so easy to read. They're written for a middle grade audience, but it still explores a lot of ideas that you can relate to as an adult, and it's Greek mythology. So I love the way that Rick Riordan kind of always incorporates different aspects of it and ties it together so neatly and does it with a lot of accuracy. So I am really glad I'm rereading these. I am definitely going to reread everything in the Percy Jackson universe. It's been a while since I've also read the second set of books that are related to Percy Jackson, the Heroes of Olympus, which is the first one starts as The Lost Hero. And those I like because they're a little bit longer. I read those when I was in high school because that's when they were starting to come out. And I really liked them. I really enjoyed them. I think I may get a little bit more out of them as an adult. But we'll see. I only read them, I think I read The Lost Hero twice and then the rest of them only once. So I definitely can take away more, because the first time you read something, you don't 100% get all of the messaging behind it, especially how I read books. I read them very surface level the first time, just trying to figure out the plot, the characters. It's kind of like watching a movie multiple times, especially something like Marvel, where the first time you watch it, you're like, okay, this is what it's about. Now I can go and get the rest of the messaging. So that's what I do with books, and I definitely do that with books that I own, because if I own them, I definitely want to read them multiple times. So yeah, the Percy Jackson series, those are 4, 3, and 2, with Sea of Monsters, Titan's Curse, and The Lightning Thief, respectively. And the last book that I have for you guys today is probably one of my absolute favorites from the year. Like, if I were to do a little, like, elimination thing, which I kind of want to do, but for 2023, this book would definitely be one of the final 4. So it is What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. I got this in my November Book of the Month box, and I finally sat down and read it in December, and I am so glad I did. I absolutely adored it. I like the characters. I like the point of view. It's told from the perspective of someone who is Argentinian and Bolivian, and she goes to Egypt after she finds out that her parents have died in some sort of accident. They've disappeared. Nobody really knows what happened, but they are presumed dead. And so she tries to go to figure out what happened, and she meets a guy that it works for her uncle, and basically the first like 50 pages-ish of the book is her trying to convince this guy that she belongs there, and she's not taking no for an answer. So she sails all the way to Egypt by herself. She is dressed as a widow, so then that way it doesn't look like as sus that she is traveling alone. And he's like, nope, you're getting back on the ship. And she said, no. And she just walks away and he's still sitting there holding all of her luggage. And she's like, if I don't have it, that's okay. So I like the main character. She is sassy, she's independent, she is super intelligent, and I like the path that it takes, and a lot of the Egyptian mythology that ends up in it. It's basically, her parents are archaeologists from the late 1800s during the Victorian period, and it just shows a different side of the culture. I think the author did a fantastic job of researching. I have been like kind of just surface level researching ancient Egypt as well, because I think that any civilization that can last for 4,000 years definitely deserves to be looked at and studied. And I think she did a fantastic job. So if you're looking for something, this is definitely like a YA book. The romance is kind of like the B or C plot. It's not the whole thing, which I really enjoy. I would recommend finding this book, whether it's from your library or picking it up at the bookstore. It was one of my absolute favorite reads of 2023. So that's all for me for today. Thank you for watching. If in case you forgot, my name is Paige. Hi, I post reading, writing, and travel related content. If you like what you see, please hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you guys all very soon with another video. Bye!